June 1967. One small country surrounded by enemies fights three armies at once: Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. In just 6 days, the borders of the Middle East will be rewritten, and the region will never be the same again. Less than 20 years after its creation, Israel is ringed by hostile states. To the south, Egypt; to the east, Jordan and Iraq; to the north, Syria and Lebanon. Behind them stand powerful backers, the Soviet Union and the United States. The first Arab-Israeli war in 1948 ended not with peace, but with a fragile armistice lines. Israel controlled more land than the original UN plan. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinian refugees fled or were expelled. No permanent borders, no final settlement, only a tense pause. In 1956, Israel, Britain, and France attacked Egypt after President Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal. Under US and Soviet pressure, Israel withdrew from Sinai in exchange for UN peacekeepers and free passage through the Strait of Tiran. The guns fell silent, but grievances remained. Through the early 1960s, the region simmered. Palestinian guerrilla raids, Israeli reprisals, and artillery duels along the Syrian and Jordanian borders kept fear alive on all sides. Nasser's calls for Arab unity and resistance turned him into a symbol of defiance against Israel. In May 1967, Soviet intelligence falsely told Egypt that Israel was massing troops to attack Syria. Nasser reacted dramatically. Egyptian forces moved into Sinai, UN peacekeepers were ordered out, and Egyptian armor dug into positions only a short drive from Israel's heartland. On May 22nd, Egypt closed the Strait of Tiran to Israeli shipping, cutting off the Red Sea route to Asia. Israeli leaders had repeatedly warned that such a move would be considered an act of war, a direct threat to their economy and their survival. Egypt signed defense pacts with Jordan and later with Iraq. Syrian forces stood ready in the north. Arab radio broadcasts promised victory and spoke of erasing past defeats. In Israel, surrounded on 3 fronts, many feared a catastrophe that could end the young state. Israel called up its reserves, filling roads with buses and tanks. But every day of mobilization crippled the economy. Inside emergency war cabinets, generals pushed for a preemptive strike, while politicians worried about international backlash if Israel fired the first shot. On the morning of June 5th, Israel acted. In Operation Focus, almost its entire air force took off in silence, flying low over the Mediterranean to avoid radar. Their goal was simple and ruthless: destroy enemy air forces before they could ever leave the ground. Wave after wave of Israeli jets struck Egyptian airfields across Sinai and deep inside Egypt. Runways were cratered, hangars exploded, and fuel depots went up in fireballs. Hundreds of Egyptian aircraft were destroyed on the ground, many without firing a single shot. After crippling Egypt's air force, Israeli jets turned to Jordanian, Syrian, and Iraqi airfields. By the end of the first day, Israel claimed near total control of the skies. From that point on, every battle on land would take place under the shadow of Israeli air power. With the skies largely secured, Israeli armored divisions surged into Sinai. Instead of grinding straight ahead, they used speed and maneuver, slipping between Egyptian strongpoints, flanking defenses, and aiming to cut vital roads. Their objective? Break the army, not just push the front line. In Gaza and northern Sinai, Egyptian units resisted fiercely. Towns and fortified positions changed hands in bitter fighting. But as news of shattered airfields and breakthroughs spread, confusion turned to retreat. Roads clogged with vehicles, and discipline collapsed in some sectors. As Egyptian forces tried to withdraw westward, many converged on narrow passes in the desert mountains. There, under continuous airstrikes and artillery fire,
Convoys jammed and stalled. Tanks, trucks, and guns burned together, turning escape routes into graveyards of twisted metal. Within 3 days, Israeli armored spearheads reached the eastern bank of the Suez Canal. Egyptian units that could still move retreated across the water. When the guns finally fell silent in Sinai, Israel controlled the entire peninsula and the Gaza Strip, a stunning reversal of the pre-war map.
On June 5th, heavy Jordanian shelling hit West Jerusalem and other Israeli targets. Confusing reports and Egyptian claims of early success encouraged Jordan's king to commit fully to the fight. Soon, the conflict expanded into fierce urban battles in and around East Jerusalem and the West Bank. In Jerusalem, Israeli forces fought to break through Jordanian lines that had divided the city since 1948. Street-to-street combat, machine gun nests in stone houses, and sniper fire around the old city walls turned holy sites and ancient neighborhoods into a modern battlefield. On June 7th, after Jordanian units withdrew, Israeli paratroopers entered the old city. Reaching the western wall, many soldiers wept, prayed, or simply touched the ancient stones. For Israelis, it was a moment of historic return. For others, it marked the start of a new occupation of East Jerusalem. Beyond Jerusalem, Israeli units swept across the West Bank, capturing cities such as Nablus, Bethlehem, and Hebron. Jordanian forces pulled back across the Jordan River. Within days, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians found themselves living under direct Israeli military rule. To the north, Syrian artillery on the Golan Heights had long shelled Israeli communities in the valley below. Steep slopes, bunkers, and minefields made the heights a natural fortress. At first, Israel hesitated to attack, fearing a stronger Soviet reaction if Syria's territory was invaded. As Egyptian and Jordanian fronts collapsed, pressure grew to silence the Syrian guns. Israel launched a risky assault up the Golan's rocky approaches. Under fire, tanks and infantry climbed narrow roads, assaulted bunkers, and slowly broke through layered Syrian defenses on the plateau. By June 10th, Syrian positions near the town of Quneitra were collapsing. Israeli forces advanced across much of the Golan Heights just as a ceasefire came into effect. In under a week, the balance of territory in the Middle East had been transformed beyond recognition. Militarily, Israel had won a sweeping victory. It now held Sinai, Gaza, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights. But the costs were high. Thousands killed and wounded on all sides, new waves of displaced people, and millions now living under occupation or military rule. The Six-Day War lasted less than a week, but its impact still shapes the Middle East. Borders, settlements, refugees, and the status of Jerusalem all trace back to 1967. To understand today's headlines, we have to remember those 6 days when everything changed.